I don't know who needs to hear this tonight, but I felt you. Not in a dramatic or emotional way, just in that quiet heaviness that settles in when the day is finally over, and there's nothing left to distract you anymore, when the noise fades and what remains is a feeling you haven't been able to name, but you've been carrying for a while now. Maybe you've been feeling distant from God lately, not angry, not rebellious, just quieter than you used to be, and that quiet has started to worry you because you remember how things felt before, when prayer came easily, when faith felt alive and warm and close, and now it feels different, almost like you're standing at a distance watching something familiar instead of living inside it. If that's where you are, I want to tell you gently, before anything else, that this is not a correction and it's not a reminder of what you should be doing better. It's simply a place to sit for a few minutes without pressure. You don't need to fix your faith right now. You don't need the right words, and you don't need to understand why this season feels the way it does. So many people quietly assume that when they feel distant from God, it must mean they've failed somehow, that they've drifted too far, prayed too little, believed too weakly, or disappointed Him in a way they can't undo. But that assumption alone creates more distance than the silence ever did. I want to gently untangle that belief with you, slowly and honestly, because distance is not always what it looks like, and silence does not mean what we've been taught to fear. If your heart feels tired, confused, or unsure, you are not out of place here, and you don't need to arrive with certainty or strength. You only need to stay for a little while. Spiritual distance hurts in a way that's difficult to explain because it doesn't feel like breaking a rule or making a mistake. It feels more like missing someone you still care deeply about, and that's why it carries so much quiet weight. Faith, at its core, is relational. So when closeness fades, even temporarily, it touches something emotional before it ever becomes theological. Many people don't talk about this openly because admitting distance feels like admitting failure, and silence feels safer than vulnerability. But the truth is that most people who feel distant from God haven't stopped believing, they haven't rejected faith, and they haven't turned away in anger. They've simply been carrying more than they realized for longer than they expected. Distance often begins after seasons of emotional strain, unanswered prayers, responsibilities that don't pause, hope that has been stretched thin, and strength that has been required again and again, without enough space to rest. At first, faith carries you through these seasons, but slowly, almost without noticing, faith becomes something you carry instead, and eventually the weight shows. Prayers become shorter, not because belief is gone, but because energy is. Silence creeps in, not because love has faded, but because exhaustion has settled. And instead of recognizing that exhaustion for what it is, many people interpret it as spiritual failure. But a tired heart doesn't need correction, it needs gentleness. And when we mistake fatigue for distance, we add shame to something that was already heavy. You didn't wake up one day and decide to pull away from God. You reached a point where your soul needed to rest, and resting was the only honest thing left to do. There is an important difference between leaving and laying down, but when you're inside the moment, they can feel exactly the same, because both involve stillness, silence, and a lack of movement. We're often taught that devotion must always look active, expressive, consistent, and visible. So when our faith becomes quiet, we assume something has gone wrong. But not every quiet season is a falling away. Sometimes it is simply a laying down of effort, a moment when the soul stops striving and admits it can't hold itself up the way it used to. Think about how rest works in any loving relationship. A child who falls asleep in their parents' arms has not abandoned them. They have trusted them enough to stop holding themselves together. In the same way, spiritual stillness can be an act of trust even when it doesn't feel like one. You didn't stop loving God. You stopped performing your faith, and there is a difference. Faith changes shape over time, and some seasons are meant for expression, while others are meant for preservation. If words feel heavy right now, it may not be because belief is fading, but because your soul is conserving what little strength it has left. And God is not offended by that. He is not counting how often you speak to Him, and He is not waiting for you to explain your silence. Often the most honest spiritual question is not what's wrong with me, but how tired am I really? Because that question opens the door to compassion instead of shame. One of the hardest parts of quiet seasons is how quickly silence gets interpreted as absence, especially in a world that equates connection with constant communication. We are surrounded by noise, updates, explanations, and reassurance, so when faith grows quiet, it can feel empty even when it isn't. But there are relationships in your life that don't need constant conversation to remain close. Relationships where presence is enough, where sitting beside someone without speaking still feels connected and safe. God's presence does not disappear when words do. And in many spiritual traditions, silence is not seen as a lack of connection, but as one of its deepest forms. Removes distraction, strips away performance, and invites trust instead of certainty. When God feels silent, it doesn't mean He has stepped back, and it doesn't mean you've been left alone. It may mean the relationship has entered a deeper, quieter place where reassurance is no longer constant, but presence is steady. Silence feels uncomfortable because it removes control and clarity is comforting. But faith was never meant to be constant certainty. Faith was meant to be trust, and trust often grows in places where explanations are absent. If God feels far right now, consider gently that He may not be far at all, just close enough that words are no longer necessary, and close enough that you are allowed to rest without fear of being forgotten. Many people carry the belief that returning to God requires a moment, a breakdown, a promise, or a dramatic turning point that proves sincerity, but returning does not need to look like that at all. You don't have to come back loudly with emotion, certainty, or answers. You can come back quietly, unsure, tired, and incomplete. God does not require a performance to welcome you, and He does not demand intensity to prove devotion. If all you can do right now is sit and breathe, that is enough. If all you can offer is honesty about how little you have left, that is devotion. You don't need to rebuild everything at once or explain where you've been, because you are not late and you are not behind. Faith is not a race, and closeness with God is not something you miss permanently because you paused. God meets people exactly where they are, not where they think they should be, and if you are here, listening, tired but still open, then you are already closer than you realize. We live in a world that celebrates effort, productivity, and visible progress, so stillness can feel uncomfortable and even irresponsible, especially spiritually. But stillness is often one of the most honest expressions of faith. Stillness says you trust that you don't have to hold everything together on your own, that you are still seen even when you are quiet, and that growth can happen without being visible to anyone else. Some of the deepest growth happens underground, unseen, and unnamed, long before anything shows on the surface. If your faith feels small right now, it doesn't mean it's weak. Seeds are small too, and their growth is hidden long before it becomes visible. Let yourself be still without guilt, without explanation, and without rushing yourself into the next season before this one has done its quiet work. If you've been feeling distant from God, I want you to hear this clearly and gently. Without pressure or expectation, you are not failing, you are not forgotten, and you are not required to fix yourself before being close again. If all you can offer God right now is your tired heart, that is still devotion, and it is still enough. You don't have to come back loudly. You don't have to come back strong. And you don't have to come back with certainty. You can come back quietly, slowly, and honestly. And even if you're not ready to come back at all yet, even if all you can do is listen from a distance, you are still held, still seen, and still welcome. Stay as long as you need, because this space isn't going anywhere, and neither is God.